Hey guys, so welcome to our first review video about stuff from earlier in the year. I don't know exactly what was covered at that UNCC review session a few weeks ago, so if this was covered, then you probably got a lot of this stuff, but I don't know, I know not everyone went, so if you didn't go, this will definitely be kind of helpful for stuff from the very, very beginning, including the summer reading stuff. All right, let's get started. Okay, so first thing we want to talk about is the different groups that basically help settle what becomes North America and the United States. The three groups you got Spain, England, and France. As you can tell from looking at the map, they all settle in different places. The Spanish are primarily located down in um, Central America and South America. Florida, obviously, they have control of that. The Spanish Empire will continue to grow and eventually go into include places like California and the Southwest, and even places like Colorado a little bit. Meanwhile, the French, they're that purple one. They're all the way up in Canada, and we'll talk about that in a second, why that's important to them. And then finally, you will see the English colonies, the British colonies, essentially on that east coast of the United States, but really barely holding on that very small edge. All right, so let's talk about the Spanish colonies, what we care about. First thing is the location. Like I said, is primarily going to be in Central America, South America, Florida, the Caribbean, and eventually will extend all the way out to places like New Mexico, Arizona, and California. Now, what we want to remember is what they were focused on, and that depends on where they were. So, broadly speaking, the Spanish were focused on getting precious metals, gold. There were large gold supplies in Mexico. There were precious metals in the mountains of the Andes. And so when they arrived, they began to basically get as much of that as they possibly could. Um, Later on, especially in the Caribbean, they're going to transition away from that into more your tobacco and sugar plantations. But the big thing I'm going to emphasize is their quest for gold. Um, and we'll get to that a little bit, why that matters a little bit later. All right, now in terms of Native Americans, how they treat Native Americans, uh, pretty terribly. A couple key terms we might want to remember, things like encomienda, which was a form of slavery essentially, where Spanish colonists were provided land and Native American workers to work the land in an attempt to kind of speed up colonization for the Spanish. The one caveat was they had to convert them to Catholicism or teach them about Catholicism. So I think it's very easy to say that they had a very bad treatment of Native Americans. In fact, they destroyed the Inca, the Aztec. Their just treatment of Native Americans got nicknamed the Black Legend, so obviously not good. All right, the French location. All right, so here's the thing: the French are going to be located essentially what is in modern day Canada. Eventually, over time, they will gain control over things along the Mississippi River and the Ohio River Valley, which we know that's going to be a matter more. All right, now here's the thing: there's a couple factors here that makes the French colonies different. One is that um, they, as you can see from this picture right here, not going to be focused on agriculture. Okay, why? Well, look where they're located. For the most part, they're located right here. Not ideal for agriculture. Too cold, rocky, thin soil, very thick with trees. Not going to be good for doing that kind of work. And so they're gonna focus on fur trading, at least in this region. They will eventually have control of some places in the Caribbean, and then we'll see some sugar plantations there. Now, Native Americans, what we want to remember about the French and Native Americans, and again, this picture kind of does a decent job illustrating for us, is that they understood the importance of Native American relationships. They understood that you needed to work with them. Why? Because if they're not doing mass agriculture, the way they're going to make money is the fur trade. So why be the people who go do the hunting? Go be the people who buy the fur from the Native Americans who do the hunting for you. Um, the French and Native Americans got along very well, mainly because the Native Americans learned to respect them, and also the French understood the importance of gift giving, which is a kind of core principle in many Native American cultures. Now let's start with the English. As we said, the English eventually they will basically, in terms of location, will make up all the coast of East Coast of the United States, right, except for Florida. Uh, why is that significant? Well, if we start thinking about it, and we talked about in class, the South, New England, and the Middle colonies all are pretty geographically diverse and different from one another. Um, that matters because that's going to change what their emphasis is going to be. So up here in New England, we're going to talk about the importance of the ocean, shipbuilding, lumber, fishing, just trade in general. Like the ocean is the centerpiece of this colonies. Meanwhile, down here in the middle colonies, we're going to see larger cities like in New York and Philadelphia emerge as major shipping hubs, but it's also known as the breadbasket, right? They're going to produce not cash crops, but commodities that are important for the production of food. And then down here in the south, we're going to see the emergence of obviously tobacco, more on that later, but other things like rice and indigo. They kind of become this cash crop driven region um, because, again, their geography allows them to have longer growing seasons, therefore, they're going to grow more. Native Americans, as we said, number one rule in American history, and since the British kind of were the major founding force in American history, I think that rule applies here, even though we're not America yet, is Native Americans always lose. There are several examples of wars between the colonists and Native Americans. The two most famous ones are King Philip's War up in New England, and then down in Virginia, the Powhatan Wars. In both cases, the colonists and the Native Americans fought, and essentially in every case, Native Americans were defeated. It was not a positive relationship. They often used the court systems or violence to steal their land from them. Now, I threw the Dutch in here just because they do technically settle in America, or what is now America. The location is modern day Manhattan and parts of New York up through the Hudson River. Their emphasis was trade. They were not concerned about nationalism in the sense that I need to make sure my mother country gets rich. Nah, I didn't care about that. They just wanted to make money. So they were open to trading with everybody. In terms of the relationship with Native Americans, mixed. The most famous story we should know about their treatment of Native Americans is that the island of Manhattan was purchased for just $26. So the Dutch, if the Indians could help them make money, they were cool with it. The Indians were in their way, they got rid of them. So, not a great relationship either way. All right. Now I'll start talking about motivations, right? Why did the colonists come? And the three big ones we gotta know are the G's, right? Gold, glory, and God. I'll start with God. All right. Big thing here is this. In Europe, we had the Protestant Reformation. Europe was basically breaking apart along Protestant lines and Catholic lines. And so for some groups, colonization was important as an attempt to spread their faith. The Spanish were really focused on this. The Catholic Church came to the Americas and basically, as I said, with the encomienda system, converted lots and lots and lots of people. The hope was that they would be able to increase the number of people who were Catholics. The English also cared about Protestantism and spreading it as well, but it was not as big a focus. So, what should we think about? Missionaries, people getting off the boat there to convert. All right, glory. There's two ways to look at glory here, right? First, from the individual explorers. They were hoping to get rich and famous. The printing press had just been invented. So the stories of their legacy, the stories of their accomplishments and their places they visited could make them money and fame. That was really important to them. But also there's this idea of glory for the leaders of the country. If you were the king who was able to send an explorer out who discovered something new and they could claim it as theirs, and man, it made them rich and made them happy. The famous examples I would kind of point to here would be Isabella and Ferdinand from Spain. Spain was kind of a country trying to get their stuff together, and Isabella and Ferdinand put the Columbus and other people out to go and explore and get rich. Again, not just for the explorers, but also for the kings, who made them seem more credible and powerful. Gold. This is pretty obvious. Make money, right? Kind of connecting things to history here for a little bit. Thing we care about the most is the idea of the Silk Road. The Silk Road was a land route that went from basically Europe to China. The problem was it was really expensive. Anything that went from China to Europe, by the time it got to Europe, the price was astronomically higher. And the Europeans got tired of having to pay all these middle people to kind of carry it along the Silk Road. So what do they want to do? They want to get in a boat, go to Asia or India, fill up with the supplies, and come back on their own. And here's the thing, the prices wouldn't have dropped probably, but they would have been the ones making all the money, not the middlemen carrying it along the trade route. So easily the greatest motivation here is going to be gold. And we see that play out in terms of how the British will treat the Americans, or will become the American colonists. They're going to be basically making sure all that money comes back to them. Now, one of the things that's going to be a major tipping point in world history is this defeat of the Spanish Armada. All right, so big things we want to know about the defeat of the Spanish Armada. One, the Spanish attempted to invade England. It went terribly wrong. If you can look at the map up here, right? All these little things you see here, those are shipwrecks. So the Spanish basically decided they were going to invade England with a massive army, huge navy, 30,000 soldiers. They were going to land and basically go to London. Now, the English could never have defeated them in a straight up war. So, what they did was they used a combination of things. One, they had smaller ships that could basically circle and weave in and around the large Spanish boats. The other thing they did was the English Channel gets very narrow, about 25 miles in width. That's it. So, the huge navy, the English were able to jam it all up, and then they actually put explosives in their boat and blew everything up in an attempt to kind of destroy um, the Spanish. The Spanish freaked out and started crashing into each other and running into aground and all this stuff. So instead of simply just turning around and going back home, they decided to go all the way around England. And as you can see, that was a terrible mistake. There was brutal storms that basically crashed them into the coast of Ireland and northern England or Scotland. Um, what do we care about, right? What this does is that it basically the Spanish were the global power. That's over. The English now will begin to emerge. And that's significant to us as a developing colony, is now we don't have to compete with the Spanish on the oceans. It allows for easier trade between England and the colonies. And again, that means the colonies here will be able to flourish that much better and faster because there's no interference. All right, Columbian Exchange. Couple concepts we want to get out of this. So first of all, this was a movement of goods, diseases, plants, animals from the old world, Europe, Africa, and Asia, to the new world, which would be North and South America and the Caribbean. A couple things we want to kind of focus on here, right? Uh, some of the animals that were brought over were very significant to the development of this region. For example, certainly all the animals that we talk about, they did the work, they helped with communication, they did all those things. Probably the most significant thing, the thing that I would expect you to remember, and I think the AP people would want you to remember, is diseases, right? Things like smallpox, the flu, measles, all those things came from Europe. And because of years and years of living in filth, they had just kind of become used to them. They brought all those new diseases over to the Americas, and guess what? They had never experienced these things, and these diseases basically wiped them out. All right, we're basically talking about 90 to 95% of the Native American population will be wiped out within basically 350 years of contact. Yes, some of it was through violence, but a good chunk of it was done through diseases. Some of it intentional, some of it not.